ages of 30 to 50 years old. Although rare, it can develop in early childhood. Individuals with a Western European background do have a slightly higher chance of developing the disease, and individuals that do have HD have a 50% chance of passing it on to their offspring. And the child who does not inherit the HD gene will not develop the disease and will likely not pass it on to future generations. In the diagram to the right, you can see the percentage of the most affected age ranges, with 86.6% being between the ages of 22 to 29 years old. Then next, the 50 plus age range, which is 9.4%, and the smallest percentage being individuals between birth and 21 years old. And looking at this worldview map, you can see the countries that have a prevalence of HD, with the red regions indicating 5 plus of cases per 100,000 per region. And I want to take a closer look into Venezuela, which is the only red region in South America. And I want to take an even closer look into the western coast of Venezuela at a lake called Lake Maracaibo. Now, this is where it gets very interesting. In Venezuela alone, HD has a prevalence of 1 out of every 20,000 people. In this small area, this lake village, it has a prevalence of 7 cases per every 100 people. The Venezuelan families of Huntington's disease are comprised of 83 kindreds, and for background, a kindred is a group of related families stemming from a common ancestor. This family, it spanned back 10 generations. One kindred alone has over 14,000 individuals with the inherited gene. This seems to be stemming from one lady in the community dating back as early as the 19th century, making Maracaibo one of the highest prevalences worldwide. Then, mm, there. Moving on to molecular mechanisms. Huntington's disease is caused by a mutation of the HTT gene that gives instructions for making proteins called huntingtin. Although researchers are still unclear about the exact function of the protein, it seems to be important to neurons in the brain. At the molecular level, HD is caused by a CAG trinucleotide expansion repeat with within the exon 1 and the HTT gene. It affects individuals with the number of CAG repeats expanded from the normal population, which is about 16 to 20 repeats, to greater than 35. CAG codes for glutamine. Within the expanded version, glutamine is altered in the structure of the Huntington protein, causes fragmentation and aggregation within, resulting in misfolding of the protein, excuse me. The longer the repeat, it's the earlier the onset of the symptoms, so that's when you'll see it in children. And now I'm going to pass this on to Raquel, where she will discuss the signs and symptoms of Huntington's disease.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So now let us discuss the signs and symptoms of HD. So these can be broken up into 3 categories.
I can't hear. I don't know if anyone
Raquel, I
else
think you
can.
paused.
Raquel, you start again. You went frozen just almost as soon as you started talking. No panic, Elizabeth. We'll fix this.
Okay.
Raquel, can you hear us? Yeah, tell her to log out and log back in again.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
We can, but
I think I'm going to go ahead and connect to my hotspot because
right. Yeah, do that. We lost you almost as soon as you started speaking, so we can come back to this point.
I don't see you guys. Do you guys see me?
We can, but it might be worth you turning off your video if you're struggling for bandwidth.
Okay, I'm just gonna sign out really quick and sign back in. Give
Okay.
me 1 second.
Anybody else want to do a song too?
Who is on next?
Sandra.
Ready to rock and roll? Welcome back, Raquel.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Don't worry, I
That doesn't
think
happen
I-
normally.
Don't worry, Raquel, I have stopped the clock, and I think it is worth you turning off your video just as you're struggling with bandwidth. We can
Okay.
hear you.
I can do that. Give me
Okay, so
one
Elizabeth gave us the introduction and talked us about some genetics of Huntington's disease, and Raquel is going to tell us about signs and symptoms.
Yes. Okay, so let me go ahead and pick back up where I left off, which was the physical aspects. So this could be mild clumsiness and involuntary jerking or dance-like movements. Again, this is known as chorea. They may also have an impaired gait, posture, and balance. Additionally, muscle problems such as rigidity or muscle contracture, as well as slow or unusual eye movements and difficulty with speech or swallowing, just to name a few. Cognitive impairments often associated with HD include difficulty organizing, prioritizing, and focusing on tasks. There's a lack of flexibility or tendency to get stuck on a thought, behavior, or action. And then lack of awareness of one's own behaviors and abilities, and even lack of impulse control. And that can lead to outbursts. There may even be slowness in processing thoughts or finding words, and then overall difficulty in just learning new information. And then emotional signs and symptoms may include mood swings, feelings of irritability, sadness, or apathy, which may lead to depression, social withdrawal and being idle, insomnia, fatigue, and loss of energy, frequent thoughts of death, dying, or suicide, and psychosis, which may also cause hallucinations. Now let us look at diagnosis and diagnostic testing. So to diagnose HD, doctors use a combination of tests and other information, including medical history, neurological and lab tests, brain imaging, and genetic testing. So a neurologist will usually conduct an in-depth interview with the patient and close family members to obtain medical history, such as a pedigree or genealogy. And this is usually to rule out any other conditions. These neurological and physical exams may review reflexes, balance, movement, muscle tone, hearing, walking, and even mental status. And then additionally, lab tests may also be ordered, and individuals that are diagnosed with HD may be referred to a specialist, such as a psychiatrist, genetic counselor, or speech pathologist, just to name a few. And then as far as diagnostic imaging goes, if a patient's family history and genetic testing are inconclusive, a doctor may recommend brain imaging, and this could be a CT, but it's more likely going to be an MRI. And then as the disease progresses, these scans typically reveal shrinkage in parts of the brain and enlargement of the ventricles, as depicted here in the top right image. And it is important to note that these changes don't necessarily indicate HD because they can occur in other disorders, but it is another step closer in getting a diagnosis. And then lastly, since genetic testing is confirmed or can confirm and rule out a suspected genetic condition or help determine a person's chance of developing or passing on a genetic disorder, it does make it possible to predict with a higher degree of certainty if someone will actually develop HD. So the most effective and accurate method to test for HD is the direct genetic test. And this counts the number of CAG repeats in the HD gene using a DNA taken from a blood sample as shown here in the bottom right. In the presence of 36 or more repeats supports a diagnosis of HD, and a test result of 26 or fewer rules it out, as mentioned earlier. And an older genetic test called linkage testing requires a sample of DNA from a closely related affected relative. This is preferred to be a parent, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And this is to identify markers close to the HD gene and to determine if a fetus has inherited a chromosome 4 mutation from an affected grandparent. And the last test is prenatal testing. This is a great option for people who have a family history of HD and are concerned about passing the disease on. And this test can be done using either of the methods we have just discussed. Thank you. Now let us talk about how to treat HD. So unfortunately, there is no treatment that can stop or reverse HD, but some of the symptoms can be treated. So both drugs, tetrabenazine and deutetrabenazine, shown here in the top right, were developed to treat chorea associated with HD specifically. And antipsychotic drugs such as Risperdal may ease chorea and help to control hallucinations, delusions, and even violent outbursts that may occur. And drugs like Ativan may also be prescribed to treat depression and anxiety. So these side effects, however, may include sedation and decreased concentration and other effects listed here on the screen. Therefore, it is extremely important that these drugs only be used when HD symptoms actually create problems for the person with HD. And now let us close with the latest updates on HD. So researchers are still learning more about Huntington's disease, and here I have listed just a couple of important updates that may improve how doctors care for the disorder moving forward in the future. So researchers funded by the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Strokes, or NINDS for short, are seeking for better understanding the cellular and molecular mechanisms involved in HD by investigating, for example, how the Huntington protein affects cell signaling and how it alters structure can contribute to disease. So the following is just a slight overview of how this research has been being done. So the question in mind for a new avenue of NINDS supported research is asking whether additional changes to the Huntington genes during development and adulthood impact disease onset and severity, and whether the Huntington gene affects the brain's overall ability to maintain healthy, undamaged DNA. And currently, this work is a promising area for identifying new modifiers of HD onset and progression that may attract or be attractive drug targets. And then chronic overexcitation, which is toxic to neurons, can be caused by excess chemical signaling between cells in the brain. Thus, several labs are investigating whether drugs that counteract exotoxicity might actually help against HD as well. And then finally, innovative methods such as optogenetics, where neurons are activated or silenced in the brain of living animals, usually mice, through light beams, are usually being used to probe the cause and progression of cell circuit defects in HD, as shown here on the right, which I think is pretty cool. And then these are